So I would like to welcome our next speaker to the stage. Our speaker is Pamela Tiller. Pamela is with, Pamela holds a Bachelor's of Urban and Regional Planning from Ryerson University in Toronto and an MBA from Copenhagen Business School in Denmark, with a focus on CSR and sustainability. She has worked extensively across Canada in corporate development and construction for the last 10 years. At present, Pamela is a senior advisor with the Danish Trade Council in North America, specializing in the business case for urban solutions, and also holds a strategic role as program manager for the 5 Nordic governments on a city solutions platform connecting key strategic stakeholders in North America with service providers in the realm of healthy, resilient, and smart cities. Let's welcome Pamela.
So it's always tough being the second last speaker of the day. So I'll just ask you to bear with me for about 15 minutes, and we'll hopefully have some exciting, really vibrant photos to look at and some interesting things for you guys to take away from you. So I just want to say thank you to the EcoDistricts conference for having us here. We're super excited. So I work for the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I'm actually here today to speak about the Nordics as part of our Nordic City Solutions platform. So we're actually working with a select group of cities and private sector stakeholders here in North America, which includes actually the city of St. Paul, on collaborating between Nordic specialists to showcase the business case for sustainable urban development in healthy, smart, and resilient cities. And I'm pretty humbled by all the experts at this conference over these last 2 days. And I'm the expert generalist. So the projects that I'm going to showcase to you today are not projects that I've worked on personally, but it's my job to be the connector. So I'm here to tell you about them, and if you're interested in anything, please feel free to come up to me, and I'll connect you with the right people so you can learn more. So we're going to start with, what comes to mind when you think of the Nordics? Just some, classic stereotypical themes: Nordic skiing, Swedish soccer fans, Vikings, and IKEA, right? But one of the things that we're really good at is sustainable urban development, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So just a show of hands of people in the audience here, who knows where the Nordics are? Could you point them out on a map? Yeah? Okay, this is pretty good. All right. So this is, for a reference point, this is where the Nordics are on the map. So obviously we're in the center of North America right now here in the Twin Cities. So the Nordics are sort of in the northern half of Europe. So it makes up 5 countries. A lot of people talk about Scandinavia. So Scandinavia is Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. So those are the countries with royal families. But Finland and Iceland, those together make up the Nordics. We also talk a lot about the EU, and Norway and Iceland are actually not part of the EU, but they are part of the Schengen zone, so it gets a little complicated. And the Baltics are completely separate countries, or it's a completely separate region, even though most of these countries are actually on the Baltic Sea. So a lot of people ask, well, why would the Nordics collaborate together? Well, the region itself is the 11th largest economy when you put them together in the world, right behind Canada, which is actually where I'm from. And it's home to about 26 million people, whereas individually, they're quite small. I mean, Denmark, the country that I work for, is 5.5 million people total. That's a little bit bigger than the Twin Cities. The region tops many international rankings in transparency, trust, environmental stewardship, gender parity, and happiness. We talk a lot about the happiness index. The Nordic region has one of the most highly educated populations in the world, and they're strongly committed to working together on both research within the region and with international partners. For example, we put a large emphasis on combating climate change. The Nordic region is innovative, and as a result, there's a high level of intellectual capital. We work together to find new, smart solutions to things. And the region has an open and free labor market. For the last 60 years, people have enjoyed free movement between countries within the Nordics to collaborate on different solutions. So you sort of ask yourself, okay, this sounds pretty nice. What kind of challenges are these cities actually facing? Well, they're quite similar to what is happening here in North America. Challenges in waste diversion, rising sea levels, traffic congestion and pollution related to that, pollution impacts on air quality, housing affordability, diversity and inclusion, stronger storms and the impacts on public infrastructure is a big one, curbing suburban sprawl and gentrification. These are all issues that we're facing here in North America as well. So how can we collaborate on these solutions to learn from each other? So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Nordics are tackling some of these challenges. So smart and accessible mobility, maybe not necessarily a district scale solution, but something that the Nordics are facing nonetheless. So for the last number of years, there's been a strong focus on smart mobility solutions in the Nordic, mostly homegrown, and I'm going to touch on a few of these over the next few slides. Most Nordic cities, like European cities, are based around a central transportation hub, which is predominantly a train station in the middle of the city. All other modes of pivot around this rail-centric approach to mobility, with the exception of Copenhagen. I have to say there, the bicycle reigns supreme. Rail and associated modes are fare integrated and accessed using a single point of payment, which I'll touch upon in more detail here and some of the innovation out of that. Overall, I'd say it has a lot to do with small incremental changes that add up to sort of an overall movement. Oslo is a world leader in switching to emission-free transport thanks to ambitious investments in electric vehicles. The city of Helsinki has a metropolitan area bus fleet that's been running on renewable biogas since 2017. This bus company will use 100% Finnish biogas made from biodegradable waste to replace natural gas in the bus fuel. This means that emissions will be cut by about 1,400 tons a year, and that's the equivalent carbon emissions of about 6.8 million miles in a conventional automobile. In Copenhagen, cyclists can save the city, or have saved the city, more than 90,000 tons of carbon emissions annually. We're going to talk a little bit about mobility as a service now and some of the solutions that have been invented to address this within the Nordics. So the city of Helsinki also has set a goal that by 2025, private car ownership should no longer be a necessity for residents. They want to make it so lucrative that you, as a citizen, don't even feel it necessary to own a car anymore. That's the goal. So in 2016, the city partnered with a digital service provider and with an app called WIM, where users can plan and pay for all modes of public-private transportation within one single interface. This includes train, taxi, bus, car share, or bike share, and users can pay with a monthly subscription base rate or for individual trips. I was sitting down with the Chief Resiliency Officer for the City of St. Paul today, and he showed me his transit app folder on his iPhone, and he had about 7 different apps that he uses just to get around the Twin Cities. So fare integration and integration of different mobility solutions into one single platform has been quite helpful for Helsinki. So Norway, so electrification of Norway. So Norway is the most electrified country in the world for electric vehicles. Through a few decades of increasing government incentives, Norway has had the highest fleet of electric vehicles anywhere on the road. This green transformation in transportation has also created new business opportunities in sectors like charging equipment, charging services, renewable energy, EV manufacturing, smart grids, and back office systems and applications in both Norway and across Europe. Talking a little bit about our little island in the Atlantic, Iceland. Iceland is the smallest of the Nordic countries with a population of around 360,000 people. It's basically a village of a country, but it continues to lead the way in many ways. In the capital, Reykjavik, the city has been focusing on public engagement of local citizens to ensure rapid growth that they're undergoing right now is done with a proper feedback loop and consultation. An example from Sweden, Hammarby Sjöstad is one of Sweden's most sustainable districts. They have a district-wide pneumatic garbage system where waste is collected and distributed through a series of central vac systems. This results in less pollution, less garbage trucks on the road, meaning it's safer for locals and pedestrians, less stress on public infrastructure, and overall cleaner streets. Talking again about our friends in Iceland, when the OPEC crisis hit in the 1970s, Iceland found itself in a very uncomfortable position as this small island out in the Atlantic without access to oil. So for their energy security, they decided to make a very big, ambitious infrastructure decision, and that was to create a district energy plan for the entire country. And it was a pretty big investment, and it was done over about a 5-year span with additional taxation on people within households within the country, but it really paid off. And now they have 99% renewable sources of energy. They've also been really great at sort of mastering some of the technology around geothermal. Copenhagen, Denmark, we all deal with issues around waste and what are we going to do with our waste, and they've sort of approached it in a very creative and perhaps very Danish way. This is the Copenhill. And it's a combined heat and power garbage incinerator that supplies district energy and electricity to the greater Copenhagen region. And they've taken NIMBYism and sort of turned it on its head. They've created a ski hill on top of a garbage incinerator. And I'm happy to say that the project is complete. The ski hill is installed, and people will start skiing on it next month. You can see this from the Royal Palace in Copenhagen. So the Queen, sitting in her palace, can literally see the ski hill that is the garbage incinerator. So some solutions that really sort of take the idea that waste in a city can be a problem and turn it into a piece of usable public infrastructure. I'm going to talk a little bit about resilience now and district level resilience, focusing on a specific project in Copenhagen. I had the pleasure of hosting a group of people in Copenhagen last month as part of a Nordic masterclass. Shannon Lemon from the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce, who's just sitting at the back, she was able to join us. And we spent 7 days of intense learning in Copenhagen with bringing in Nordic experts and really focusing on different solutions that are available. And this was one of the sites that we visited. So Tåsingeplads is a neighborhood in the east side of Copenhagen. You know, pretty standard-looking Nordic Square, 6-story apartment building, car parking, a small green space, which is more than most of these little squares get. Most of the time, the green space actually focused on the inside of the shared courtyard in these apartment buildings. But overall, pretty unremarkable from a Nordic perspective. So you see a lot of a paved surface area here. Well, on July 2nd, 2011, the city of Copenhagen had a follow-up event to a number of major storm events that had happened over a series of years, where over 2 hours, they got 150 millimeters of water. That's 6 inches of water being pushed into the stormwater management system. Needless to say, the city infrastructure did not cope very well, and the city had a pretty big realization. 50,000 homes lost access to the district energy system for a whole week. We're lucky it was in July. These type of rain events happen throughout the year. We had more than 90,000 insurance claims that were made, and upwards of $1 billion in property damage was caused, as well as delays to economy and exports. It hurt. So the city, as well as the capital region, had some pretty big decisions to make about how they were going to be dealing with public infrastructure. So this caused residents to seriously rethink the cost of the impacts of climate change and put some skin in the game to find a solution. The cost of doing nothing became too great. So the city of Copenhagen identified the neighborhood of Østerbro as a testing ground for climate solutions and created the city's first district adapted to climate change. And Rob Bennett touched on this a little bit this morning in his keynote address earlier. But the city of Copenhagen is working together with the local utility company, MGO, and neighborhood residents to form a common vision. And that vision is to turn the neighborhood of Østerbro into the greenest inner city neighborhood in Copenhagen, and at the same time adapt to withstand the large volumes of rain experienced in torrential downpours that have occurred increasingly over the last number of years. Like many partnerships within the city of Copenhagen, the intent was to test solutions within this climate change neighborhood in order to scale up to more expansive implementation across the city. It's a very practical scale or fail model. So we had the opportunity to visit this site when we were in Copenhagen a couple weeks ago and walk around. This is sort of what it looks like. So there's a high point, and I must say this is the high point in the entire neighborhood. So one of the highest points. Copenhagen's a pretty flat city, but it's they've created interactive infrastructure and play equipment associated with. You can see some of the parasols there to collect water. There's some pumping systems, some playground equipment that you can interact with, and some of the water on site. There's a native vegetation that's been planted, and there's a gentle slope that leads down into one single storm sewer outlet that collects water. So the idea is that it's obviously full resiliency infrastructure within this neighborhood, relieving stresses on the city. There's also a World War II bunker under the street there from it wasn't being used anymore. It had been paved over, and it's now been made into a music room for kids. So the kids keep instruments in there and hold music classes. Yes, in Denmark we put our children in bunkers. So I just wanted to, this is a sort of a cross-section, so you can see how the stormwater management is being done on the site just through a visual. So just going to wrap things up by saying it takes many small steps in incremental and pragmatic way to tackle the big challenges that our cities are facing. And I hope I'm giving you some insight into how the Nordics have tackled some of these challenges that they're facing. You know, many of these countries are the size of your state, so it's definitely not impossible to achieve these goals. And just to share a little bit, we're going to be, so I run a trade platform for the Nordic governments, and we're working with a number of key partners here in North America. These are some of the cities that we're working with. Obviously here in the Twin Cities, working with St. Paul, and then the city of Brampton and Toronto. And we're sort of looking for other partners and trying to get people excited. So if you're interested in learning more, please come and speak to me. I also have a little bit of information and some inspirational case studies. I have left a few on the table over here, so please feel free to come and get some. And if you're interested in learning more about our trade platform, I've got a brochure here as well. But overall, I just want to say tak, which is thank you in Scandinavian, and I hope you enjoy what I had to share with you today. Cheers.